Welcome to our bite-sized episodes of the Cardiff Met Sports Coaching Hub podcast, brought to you direct from the CRiC Conference 2024. Enjoy this episode. Welcome back to another bite-sized episode of the Sports Coaching Hub podcast here, recorded live at the 6th International Conference of CRiC. And I'm joined now by Dr Pete Holmes. Pete, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the invite.
Thanks for giving us some of your time. So we're recording this on Sunday morning. You presented yesterday.
Yeah.
We've got a fantastic poster presentation up on the board from you as well. So you've been busy for the last 24 hours. Why don't we start with what you were speaking about yesterday at the conference? Tell us a little bit about, I suppose, your journey leading up to the work that you're presenting here this weekend.
So I'm senior lecturer at Nottingham Trent. Been at Nottingham Trent for 4 years. The work that I was presenting yesterday was following on from my PhD, which was through Leeds Beckett. So I'm from Leeds, although I work in Nottingham. The work was kind of in collaboration with the RFL, the Rugby Football League, and basically looking at lifelong development of coaches. So it was something that the RFL were interested in knowing more about, how their top-level elite head coaches kind of develop over the long term. But from a research side, I was really interested in that subject area, in the sense that we know when it comes to coach education or coach development, it's difficult to change coaches and coaching practice, and there's a reason why it's difficult to change. And I guess my thoughts at the start of that and the origins of the PhD was that the reasons why it's difficult to change because these guys have been developing thoughts about coaching practice, what coaching looks like for many years prior to actually becoming coaches. So it connects to a lot of Anna's work that she just talked about there. Anna was probably about 4 or 5 years ahead of me in terms of her PhD, but very much connects to that. So it was about exploring coaches' full life stories, going back to their earliest memories as children. Families, communities, siblings, parents, sports they played and so on, and how all those things kind of shaped them to be the coaches that they are at 40, 45, 50. And
so that PhD project, you said it was sort of in partnership with the RFL. Was that PhD, was it an advertised thing and you applied for it, or was this something that you had designed yourself and you had some inspiration from, a bit of a personal rationale there as well? Where did that come from?
It was primarily designed by me through conversations with the RFL. So it wasn't an advertised post, it wasn't funded as such. So they supported me in the sense that we kind of designed the initial idea together. So it was about exploring English and Australian coaches working in English Rugby League. They helped with access to coaches.
Okay.
They kind of supported me in that sense, and that was great because at the start of the project, I didn't know any of the coaches at all, although Rugby League is my main sport. It was a real world thing that they wanted to know about, but it also sat well with the research in that area at the time.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. And I wonder if I can pick on your PhD journey just a little bit more. So fortunate to work with a great scholar and someone like Andy Sparks. How was that PhD journey for you? How challenging was it? Because we've got lots of early career researchers here at CRiC, and there'll be lots of people listening to the podcast that want to know a little bit more about people's PhD journeys. We've heard, like you said, Anna Stotter talking this morning, and others talking about that PhD journey and some of the challenges of it, but some of the liberation of it as well. What was it like working with someone like Andrew, and what was that journey like for you?
Yeah, so the whole journey was fantastic. Well, it was very mixed, let's say. I had some challenges in terms of supervision, because a number of changes in supervision over a period of time. So Andy Sparks came on about halfway through. I was a part-time PhD student, so working full-time in higher education. So part-time, I think the plan was 6 years. I ended up being 7 years. Andy joined about 3 years in. He just happened to land at Leeds Beckett when I was kind of in a bit of a lost place. I was very familiar with his work from my education prior to that, particularly my master's, going back to Leeds Beckett as well. So I'd been introduced to Andy's work and storytelling, life stories, kind of different approaches, different ways of doing things, not sticking with the tradition or the positivist or post-positivist approach. So when Andy landed at Leeds Beckett, it was me that actually sought him out. Great. In terms of, will you come on board and help me out here? It was fantastic with Andy, really, really good. I think I wasn't a typical PhD student in the sense that I was, I don't know, how old was I? Late 30s, early 40s maybe. So I think I perhaps had I been in my 20s, it might have been a little bit more, okay, tell me and I'll do it.
Okay.
Where it was more discursive, it was... it probably took me 2 or 3 meetings to reach a confidence level to be able to actually go into meetings with, okay, this is what I want, this is what I need, these are the questions I've got, as opposed to it kind of coming the other way. But yeah, fantastic experience. I think we aligned really well as well, in the sense that I've got quite a strong belief about doing what feels right. Okay. And if you can make a case for it, then do it. Yeah, you don't have to do it the set way. So for PhD students, I mean, I'm still an ECR now, I think officially, but for PhD students, or even earlier than I am ECRs, I would say don't be afraid of doing something the way that feels right. Yeah. Yes, take the advice from the really experienced professionals in the field, but also do things your way. Yeah.
There's something quite nice, I think, in just this idea of personal rationales for some of the work that's being done. A lot of the presentations that I've been to across the weekends, there's always been a personal rationale for it. There's been I felt like something wasn't quite right, or I felt like there was a gap here, and really sort of grasped it with both hands and led the way. But also, it's nice for me as well as an ECR to hear you talk about, yes, you kind of have to take on the advice to start with, but then it becomes your own, and you become a little bit braver, and like you say, you find something that's yours, and you really run with it. So I think there's something great for all of our sort of postgrads and PhD students that are listening to that. I guess with supervision, etc., nice sort of segue into the poster that you're presenting here as well, is about how we're challenged and supported, not just as research students, but also how we're challenging and supporting coaches. So I wonder if you could just share with us a little bit about what you've presented on the poster presentation here at CRiC.
Yeah, absolutely. So that work came through a project connected to some of our psychology team at Nottingham Trent. So we have a guy called Mustafa Sarkar, very well known in the sports psychology field, an international leader in terms of resilience building in sport. So the project was, it was a master's research project, a master's student, Sully, who works at a football academy. So the project was initially looking at how coaches use the notion of challenge and support in building resilience. So Mustafa previously had published a paper that had drawn on some work from education going back to the 1960s. That had talked about this kind of facilitative environment for learning has a high level of challenge, but also a high level of support. So they'd taken that idea on in terms of resilience building. So the project initially was looking at how coaches use challenge and support in building resilience. But what we actually found with the data was that coaches talked broadly about coaching, not coaching of resilience, but coaching across, using the four corners model as well, because it was football academies. So coaches were using challenge and support to develop tactical understanding, or using challenge and support to develop technical skills or social or whatever else. So the coaches were talking very broadly about coaching. And it just kind of jumped out of the data really that actually what the coaches are doing here is just playing with challenge and support. I've been involved in coaching to one degree or another for 25 years or so, and I'd never come across this idea of coaching as being about playing with challenge and support. So just got us thinking really, in a few conversations. So another colleague, Ben Ashdown, is heavily involved as well. Just got us thinking about this notion of playing with challenge and support, and that took us to the idea of everything that coaches do is a balance of challenge and support. One might be high, one might be low. They both might be mid-level. They both might be low. And from moment to moment, elements of what we do, practice design, the instructions we give, the feedback that we provide, all the time we're playing with these two dials of challenge and support. For me, I think there's something to run with there and kind of use that within coach development. Mm-hmm. I think as an early coach, if somebody had presented that to me of, what you're doing in coaching is playing with challenge. At times you're going to challenge to that level, to that level, to that level, but you're also offering support. Sometimes you might not provide support, but other times you might provide a huge amount of support. So I think there's an opportunity there to really kind of use this two-dial idea, challenge and support, to help novice coaches, perhaps even experienced coaches. Something that also drove it was I had a meeting with, it was an elite, one of the most successful rugby league coaches there's been in the last 20 years or so, who I know pretty well. And I threw this into him in a conversation. The first thing he did was got his notebook out and wrote it down and said, yeah, I've never thought about that. That is what we do, isn't it? So this was a guy who's 55 maybe, coached internationally, coached major clubs, multiple major trophies, say one of the most successful coaches there's been. He's coached all his life, never ever considered what he does as simply challenge and support. So yeah, I think we're going to try and roll with it and see where it goes, but I really like the idea of it.
Great. And I guess that's one probably of many ideas that are coming into a lot of your work you're doing, not just at Nottingham Trent, but with UK coaching and in sort of trying to present more contemporary approaches for coach development. So I know this is bite-sized, but we need to try and squeeze it in. Could you tell us a little bit about what were the key messages from your talk yesterday at the conference? Mm-hmm. What are the things that we need to be doing for coach development moving forwards, do you think?
Yeah, so I think the key standout in terms of my presentation yesterday was the notion that early life experiences start to shape us, but all our life experiences shape us as coaches. Coaching is who we are as coaches. There's an element of personality, there's an element of identity, and you can't really separate those things. So all our experiences, parenting, schooling, the jobs we've had, the education, the friendship group, the sports we've played, all those things shape us to a degree. So in terms of real world implications, and as a coach developer myself, for me that points to the use of exploring those biographies in helping coaches to understand themselves. Mm. So using it as a reflective tool for coaches to unpick who they are. Anna's just pointed to the same thing in her session there. Tom Leader yesterday also pointed to the same thing. So, the three of us know each other reasonably well, whether that will be something that we come together and take further. I've used it in coach development. So I've done some workshops with a county FA, a county rugby union. So done workshops where we've used it and it's really well received. I think coaches really like it because they've not thought about that before. It's like, well, I just do what I do. I don't really know why I do it. Okay, well, you experienced that, coach, or, this was the parenting you received, or this is the way you like to be treated. So that's kind of where it's come from. So I think there's huge real world implications there. There are opportunities for us to use something like that, a timeline exploration of coaches' lives, to help them to understand why they do things the way they do. And I think that's the first point in helping them to maybe change elements of what they do as well.
Yeah, great. And I think what you sort of stumbled into there is some of the strength of CRiC. You mentioned talking to Tom. We had Tom in for a bite-sized episode as well. Yeah. So for our listeners, fully encourage you to go and have a listen to that one as well and see the connections. But establishing those relationships and seeing what people are working on can really sort of lead to more work coming out of it. So when that paper gets published, when you collar Tom and Anna and that comes out, we'd love to have you back onto the pod and talk a little bit about how that work is crossing over and where the impacts there are for coach development, because I think there's some really strong themes there. We are due now in our next set of parallel sessions, so we'll have to wrap up the pod there. Pete, really grateful for you coming in, really thankful for you just spending 10-15 minutes with us, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
No worries, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening. If you want to know a little bit more about CRiC, head to the website cricsportcoaching.com, and you can follow along on Twitter as well at @cric_SCR.